Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this program today by the Hudson Institute Center for Religious Freedom. I'm Nina Shea and direct the center. And we're very glad to have good weather, almost 80 degrees in Washington today, because the last time we had this scheduled was in March, and many of you responded that you would come, and then it snowed. And the U.S., it wasn't much snow, but since the U.S. government was shut down, we could not go forward. So we're very, very happy that this has come off today. Our last two sessions in the prior 2 months have focused on the persecution of Christians, both in the Middle East and around the world. And I'll give you a plug for my new book, Persecuted, The Global Assault on Christians, which was the subject of our event last month. Today we're going to shift the focus somewhat to a related issue, and that is the other minorities of the Muslim world and the persecution and strife that they are suffering right now in many countries. It really, all you have to do is open up the papers and look at the headlines on Syria to begin to get a sense of the sectarian and religious persecution that is being waged against the various minorities with the rise of Islamism. And I think the world's attention was riveted beginning with the invasion of Mali a few months ago, or actually a year ago, and then we're seeing it carried forward in various other countries today. In fact, it has existed for a while in many countries, and I am very delighted to have three distinguished experts with us to explain the situation in several of the countries today on our panel. And I'm going to introduce them briefly in the order in which they will speak. They will give their presentations, short presentations, and then we will have a question and answer session for the last half hour of the program. Now, our first speaker is Farnaz Ispahani. She is a former member of the Parliament in Pakistan, was served on the Human Rights Committee of the Assembly. She is a writer. She and I have co-authored articles for the Huffington Post on these issues. She is also was named by Foreign Policy as being one of the 100 top global thinkers for 2012. And I'm pleased to say that she will be soon taking up, next month, be taking up a new position as a public policy scholar at the Wilson Center. Our next speaker is Jamshid Chokshi. Jamshid and I have also co-authored and on the minority issues. Jamshid is a professor of Iranian, Central Eurasian, and Islamic Studies at Indiana University, and he writes prolifically in many different outlets, everything from the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Forbes, Yale Global, and so forth. And he's also a council member on the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our third speaker is an old friend. In fact, we date back to the Cold War period. We were fighting for democracy and freedom in Central America and other countries, and that is Stephen Schwartz. He is executive director of the Center for Islamic Pluralism. He's a journalist, and he's also the author of the best-selling The Two Faces of Islam, Saudi Fundamentalism and Its Role in Terrorism. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speakers today.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Nina, for giving me this opportunity to speak on something that is so dear to my heart. Religious freedoms, and specifically those in my home country of Pakistan. And I hope during the question and answer session, people will ask me a little bit about the recent elections and the people who have won those elections and what that may mean for religious minorities in Pakistan, because I think that is something that US policymakers and writers and thinkers should be looking at. Pakistan's religious minorities are widely viewed as embattled or under attack. It's therefore essential to undertake a comprehensive analysis of Pakistan's policies towards its religious minority populations, both Muslim as well as non-Muslim, and propose what policy reforms Pakistan could or should undertake to ensure their protection. We need to look at a historical overview of the issue, especially in the context of expanding Islamization, and further evaluate state policy and legal provisions and their impact on the status of religious minorities. Pakistani minorities urgently need recommendations and advocacy on improving their status and security. It's not only Pakistan where Muslim as well as non-Muslim minorities are under attack. Rather, this is a phenomenon which is prevalent in a number of Muslim-majority countries. However, this issue is becoming increasingly urgent as the so-called Arab Spring has brought countries like Egypt rapidly into the same situation as those of us in non-Arab countries. Pakistan and other Muslim-majority countries like Indonesia, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Egypt, and the way they treat their majority Christians, and the way the government treats their minority populations has been worsening over the decades. But the newer role of stateless actors or extremist groups in these countries is extremely alarming. Pakistan was founded in 1947 in the hope of creating a country for South Asia's Muslims. The country's founding fathers did not envisage an Islamic state and clearly declared that non-Muslims would be equal citizens in the new country. The first cabinet of Pakistan's federal government included members of almost every major religion and every Muslim sect in South Asia. But over the years, the situation for religious minorities has deteriorated amid clamor for greater Islamization. In 2011, two leading political figures were assassinated for their religious views. Governor Punjab Salman Taseer, a Sunni Muslim, was killed for questioning the mistreatment of Pakistanis Christians, while Christian minister Shahbaz Bhatti was killed for speaking up also for the country's non-Muslims. There's been a steady decline in religious tolerance in Pakistan over the last 65 years. At the time of Pakistan's birth and the partition of India in 1947, non-Muslim minorities comprised 25% of the new country's population, whereas today they only comprise 5%. According to the last census in Pakistan, which collected such data, Christians constitute today 1.59% and Hindus 1.60% of Pakistan's population. While much of the cleansing of the population took place in major events such as the partition of India and Pakistan around the 1965 and 1971 wars, there has also been a steady rise in incidents involving attacks on both Christians and Hindus in the last decade. One incident of forced conversion of a Hindu young woman that garnered a lot of media coverage was that of Rinkle Kumari. She had been abducted with the help of a ruling party lawmaker. In a case that had been widely reported in the liberal Pakistani media, Rinkle, who was abducted on February 24th, was forced to marry one Naveed Shah and convert to Islam. She was subsequently produced before a civil judge twice but she was reportedly coerced into claiming that she had converted on her own will, even as her family was denied access to her in kangaroo court proceedings that revealed in video clips to be led by a frenzied mob of zealots, including armed followers of the Pakistani lawmaker. According to Pakistan civil liberties activists, Wrinkle was allegedly threatened while in police custody that if she did not change her statement, she and her family would be killed. Here I quote Congressman Brad Sherman. Wrinkle Kumari's case is just one case of abductions and forced religious conversion in Pakistan. He said in a letter to President Asif Ali Zardari of Pakistan, citing the Asian Human Rights Commission, the figure of 20 to 25 kidnappings and forced conversions of Hindu girls in Sindh every month. Congressman Sherman added, I urge you to take all necessary steps to bring an end to this practice and other harassment of Hindus in Pakistan. State-sponsored discrimination against minority groups in Pakistan is rampant today and is causing Hindus to migrate out of Pakistan in droves. Besides the forced conversions, there have been several reports in recent months of Hindu families seeking to migrate to India in the face of growing radical Islamization of Pakistan, including the abduction, forcible conversions, and other things. One of the most major problems in Pakistan, and I think a lot of people here are aware of it, is the blasphemy law, which is used to persecute minorities. The Pakistan Penal Code prohibits blasphemy against any recognized religion, providing penalties ranging from a fine to death. An accusation of blasphemy commonly subjects the accused, police, lawyers, and judges to harassment, threats, and attacks. An accusation is sometimes a prelude to vigilantism and rioting. Recently, we have had several occurrences, incidents in Pakistan where a person who was picked up on the charges of blasphemy and put in jail, mobs showed up, beat up the police, took the person outside, and burnt them alive. This is the reality of what is happening in Pakistan today. Calls for change in the blasphemy laws have been strongly resisted by the Islamic parties. That was in the past. The very frightening thing today is that the mainstream political parties are also now not speaking at all on this issue because of the assassinations of people like Governor Salman Taseer and Federal Minister Shahbaz Bhatti, people who had security, people who were well known, people who were in the mainstream. So ordinary people now are very, very scared, as are regular lawmakers and others. Between 1986 and 2007, and I just want to show you how rapidly the official counts of blasphemy offenses have gone up. Between 1986 and 2007, Pakistani authorities charged 647 people with blasphemy offenses. 50% of these were non-Muslims, who represent only 3% of the national population. No judicial execution for blasphemy has ever occurred in Pakistan, but 20 of those charged were murdered. By 2010, the total number of people charged under these laws had grown to about 1,274. So between 2007 and 2010, you see almost a doubling of the number. The only law that may be useful in countering misuse of the blasphemy law is the Pakistan Penal Code Article 153 A. Whoever by words, either spoken or written, or by signs, or by visible representations, or otherwise, promotes or incites or attempts to promote or incite on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, caste or community, or any other ground whatsoever, disharmony or feelings of enmity, hatred or ill will between different religious, racial, linguistic or regional groups or castes or communities shall be fined and punished with imprisonment for a year, for a term that may extend to 5 years. I could be mistaken, but I do not remember this part of the penal code being used to fight charges of blasphemy. On 12th January 2011, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Yusuf Raza Gilani, once again said and reiterated that there would be no amendments to the blasphemy law in Pakistan. Beginning with the 70s, the law in Pakistan has not been supportive of religious minorities. In 1974, Pakistan's constitution was amended to declare members of the Ahmadiyya sect, the Ahmadis, as non-Muslims, paving the way for similar demands against other Muslim denominations. Thus, the problem of religious discrimination now extends not only to non-Muslim groups such as Hindus and Christians, but also applies to sects within Islam that do not conform to Sunni/Salafi orthodoxy. Pakistan's founding father, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was a Shia Muslim, as were a number of his other colleagues. Pakistan's first foreign minister, Zafrullah Khan, was an Ahmadi Muslim. Shias form around 20% of the population. Today, Ahmadis only around 0.22%. Basically, Sunni Shia tensions and tensions with the Ahmadi community started as early as the 50s, but basically in 1979, when military dictator General Zia-ul-Haq started imposing started institutionalizing Islam in every segment of society through laws and the bureaucracy, etc., that's where the rise of Sunni radical organizations and their militant offshoots really took off. Discriminatory laws implemented during the 80s and violence against religious minorities continue to remain of serious concern. Pakistan's infamous blasphemy law has targeted religious minorities on a regular basis. And the most famous case is that of Asia Bibi, a Christian from Punjab province who became the first woman in the country's history to be sentenced to death for blasphemy. A number of leading Pakistani political figures, professionals, academics, and media personalities are and have been from the Shia community. Yet this community has faced not only discrimination, but has been targeted and attacked by extremist Salafist radical groups. These groups not only have militant offshoots, but they have ties to political parties and mainstream political parties now, which affords them both political influence and protection. In the last year, the number of weekly attacks on Shias has led many Pakistanis to refer to 2012 as the year of Shia genocide, and 2013 has already proved to be the same. So my question for everyone is Pakistan, which literally means the land of the pure, actually becoming the land of the purge? After each act of violence against religious minorities, the Pakistani Taliban, the Lashkar-e-Jangvi, or the Sipa-e-Sahaba proudly own up to them without fear of reprisal or punishment. The LEJ and Sipa-e-Sahaba were even able to put up candidates in our recent elections these are 55 known terrorists who were in jail for sectarian murders and sectarian attacks. The Election Commission of Pakistan allowed them to contest and clear their candidacies in the recent elections. So when I talk about the institutionalization that started under Zia-ul-Haq, this is the fruits that Pakistan and the region are now dealing with. The recent mob attack on Christians in Lahore, resulting in the burning down of 100 Christian homes while the police stood by, is a reminder of how unsafe Pakistan has become for religious minorities. The attack on Christians follows a rising tide of attack on Pakistan's Shia Muslims, sometimes mischaracterized in the media as a product of sectarian conflict. Sectarian is when two sects are attacking each other. In Pakistan, the Christians are not attacking the Takfiris. In Pakistan, the Hindus are not attacking them. In Pakistan, the Shias are not attacking them. And none of the Muslim and non-Muslim minorities have the police, the state, the constitution, the penal code, and political parties backing them. So this is a genocide. This is not sectarian conflict. So basically, just to close up, in reality, these increasingly ferocious attacks reflect the ambitious project of Islamists to purify Pakistan, making it a bastion of a narrow version of Takfiri Islam. Pakistan, which literally translates as the land of the pure. But what started in an imperceptible way as early as the 1940s, picking up momentum in the 1990s, is a drive to transform Pakistan into a land of religious purification. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I'll make sure I don't toss over, right, and tumble down, but that may happen, who knows. Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic's position toward and treatment of religious minorities is conditioned by Shia religious notions of purity and pollution, by medieval Islamic law on dhimmis or protected religious minorities, by modern anti-Semitism, by post-revolution anti-Westernism, and by Islamic fundamentalism. In its 2013 report, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom summarized the situation as follows. The government of Iran continues to engage in systematic, ongoing, and violations of religious freedom, including prolonged detention, torture, and executions based primarily on or entirely upon the religion of the accused. Now, Article 13 of Iran's Islamic Constitution stipulates Zoroastrian, Jewish, and Christian Iranians are the only recognized religious minorities. That's the wording of the Constitution on that matter. This form of minority designation implicitly builds upon the status held by those communities as dhimmis or protected groups in medieval and pre-modern times. Within that constitutional framework, Zoroastrians and Jews are permitted one elected national legislator each, and Christians are granted 3 parliamentarians, 1 for Assyrian Chaldeans or Nestorians, and 2 for Armenians. So 1 each for Jews and Christians, one parliamentarian for Assyrian Chaldeans, and 2 for Armenians, among 290 members of the unicameral Majlis or parliament. Members of the 3 recognized religious minorities are barred, however, from seeking high public office in the executive and judicial branches, offices reserved for Muslims. nor can they serve in the theocratic branch, which comprises the Assembly of Experts, the Expediency Council, the Guardian Council, and the Office of the Supreme Leader. Other non-Muslim religious communities have no constitutional recognition and consequently no legal standing within the Islamic Republic. So, more recent Christian groups, namely more recent within Iran, Christian groups, such as Catholics and Protestants, are not regarded as heritage religious communities. Mandaeans, whose community in Iran dates back to pre-Islamic times, have endeavored to gain official recognition through claims that their faith was founded by the biblical John the Baptist, but their quest has not met with success so far. Baha'is are considered by the mullahs or Shia clergymen to be lapsed heretical Muslims who should be reconverted to Islam or else persecuted. In essence, contemporary Iran's constitution enshrines religion as a primary marker of difference within the country's population. It also creates distinctions between heritage religious minorities, specifically Zoroastrians, Jews, Armenian Christians, and Chaldean Assyrian Christians, on the one hand, and more recent religious minorities, Baha'is, Catholics, Protestants. And it does so based on those medieval categories of who are or aren't protected minorities. Likewise, although Sunnis and Sufis are considered fellow Muslims, they are regarded as heterodox by the Shia ayatollahs and mullahs, and therefore viewed with suspicion and disdain. Iran's Sunnis are shunned owing to sectarian tensions that date back to the religio-political schisms of Islam during the 7th century, for long memories. Sufis as mystics are seen as non-conforming to the clerical hierarchy of Iran, and therefore subject to persecution. Much of the framework within which religious minorities can function in Iran derives from the fundamentalist ideologies and injunctions of the Islamic Republic's spiritual and political founder, the late Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. And to give you some sort of a little glimpse into Khomeini's writings, he issued a religious declaration, a Risala, in 1987, while he was still the supreme leader, and he instructed Iran's Shiites that, to quote, "The following 7 are unclean. The first is urine, the second feces, the third semen, fourth corpses, fifth blood, sixth dogs, seventh pigs, eighth non-Muslims, ninth wine, 10th beer, 11th the sweat of a impure camel." Even more ominous are his now infamous words, to quote, "Every aspect of a non-Muslim is unclean." So it goes back to the sort of notions of religious purity and pollution, okay? Now, due to fundamental Shia beliefs of Jews being unclean, impure, and in conflict with Muslims since Muhammad's time, due to these Shia beliefs, for Khomeini and his cohorts, the establishment of the modern state of Israel, the westernization of Iranian society under the Pahlavi Shahs, came to be seen, in their opinion, as part of, in their words, a Zionist master plan. Likewise, Khomeini imagined plots against both Iran and Shiism from the other two protected minorities. While still in exile in 1970, Khomeini castigated Iran's Chaldean Assyrians and Armenian Christians, to quote, "for distorting the truth of Islam and leading Muslims astray." And shortly before seizing power, he castigated Iran's oldest religious minority for supposedly, quote, "supporting the anti-Islamic regime, namely the Pahlavi monarchy, because it wishes to revive Zoroastrianism." Khomeini's claims shaped those of his successors. So while addressing the Basij paramilitary in 2005, the current chairman of the Council of Guardians, Ayatollah Ahmad Jannati, publicly dismissed Iran's non-Muslims as, to quote, "animals who roam the earth and engage in corruption." Even the late Ayatollah Hossein Ali Montazari despite becoming a frequent critic of the regime's record on civil rights, didn't really change his views when it came to non-Muslims. Montazeri listed non-Muslims alongside swine, alcohol, and bodily waste as impure. He then went on to recommend that non-Muslims could become pure through, to quote, chaste Muslim-like behavior, characterized to me by various representatives of Iran's minorities as rubbing salt into their wounds. More recently, as challenges to the theocracy like the public protests of 2009 have emerged from a wide range of Iran's population, the mullahs and their supporters have reacted by equating religious non-conformity to violating the will of Allah. So, news media associated with the Islamic Republican Guard and others associated with former Republican Guard commanders, such as one of the current presidential candidates and also currently the secretary of the Expediency Council, Mohsen Rezai. These news sites, and let me read some of their statements. They say, Zoroastrians like Christians, Baha'is, and Jews before them have begun missionary work to influence Muslim children's thoughts and ideas through signs, symbols, and toys, with the aim of attacking the Islamic faith, threatening national security, and subverting the Islamic revolution. So these, what I hope you'll also begin to see is that actions of religious minorities are now coming to be equated in Iran to threatening national security and threatening the nation state. What are some of these toys and symbols that the mullahs are reacting to? Some of them are associated with the Persian Empire, 6th to 3rd centuries BCE. So for example, the winged figure, very popular as a pendant among Zoroastrians, now becoming increasingly popular among Iranian nationalists. These are sort of the symbols that are now regarded as taboo in the eyes of the Islamists who run the country, who view these not just as pre-Islamic motifs, but as dangerous icons threatening the nation. Likewise, an object now touring the United States, the Cyrus cylinder, which mentions freedom and security, was derided as a pagan icon by the Ayatollahs when it was exhibited on loan from the British Museum in Tehran in September 2010. So you begin to see how sort of the Ayatollahs are, sort of even looking at the past and seeing this as threatening. Likewise, Iran's fundamentally Shia hierarchy is increasingly wary of Sunni beliefs and what they regard as militant Sunni ideas moving into the Islamic Republic. They are particularly fearful that Iran's Sunni population among the Kurds in the northwest, Arabs in the southwest, and Baluch in the east will act as rear guards for neighboring nations like Saudi Arabia or groups like Jundullah or Kurdish separatists. Similarly, a Sunni neo-caliphate as envisioned by those who subscribe to Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and Wahhabi beliefs is basically antithetical to Iran's Shia-based Velayat-e-Faqih or governance of the jurist. And so what you begin to see is that the Ayatollahs are now sort of continuously beginning to monitor the Sunni minority. So in late 2009, Ayatollah Shirazi commented to the Sunni clerics in Zahedan. Zahedan is this border city between Iran and Pakistan. And his comments were as following. He said, fundamentally, it is the radical teachings of Wahhabism that have led to insecurity in the world. This insecurity arises from false belief. Make sure that your congregations do not subscribe to it, or we are watching. End of quote. Likewise, another one of the Supreme Leader's representatives, this was a representative to the Kurdistan province in the northwest, urged his fellow Shia clerics and also the Revolutionary Guards in the region to be vigilant because the regime is, to quote, fearful that Salafist doctrines are penetrating the universities. Fanned by anti-Sunni news stories, there are rising demands among the clerics that government ministries should, in quote, regulate the Sunnis. On the basis of these concerns, Iran's Shia clerics have begun to restructure the administration of Sunni madrasas or seminaries. They claim that this is not religious intervention, but in their own words, it is intended to establish the correct environment to stop infiltration of these seminaries. I should point out, however, that the move by the Iranian state to control education of minorities is not restricted only to Sunnis. The Ministry of Education has begun assigning Shia mullahs and Basij paramilitary men as instructors, not just in high school and middle schools, but also in elementary schools, including Christian, Zoroastrian, Jewish, and Mandean schools. And instructing these schools that are run by the minorities that even religious education has to utilize state-mandated textbooks. Now, turning to Baha'is. In October 2012, UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Iran, Ahmed Shahid, reported, to quote, Baha'is are the most persecuted religious minority in Iran. He noted that the number of Baha'is who are currently in prison has exceeded over 100, and they often face charges unrelated to their faith. The charges they face are national security charges. In addition, he noted that Baha'i women imprisoned for exercising their beliefs must take their infant children with them behind bars. The Iranian government is very vigilant when it comes to what they regard as any insults against Islam. They do not, however, extend the same courtesy when it comes to insults in the press, in the Iranian press, directed at, for example, Assyrian Christians. So when the current Assyrian Christian parliamentarian pointed out and appealed to the Chief Justice, Ayatollah Sadegh Larajani, that the Iranian Broadcasting Corporation was belittling Christianity, his appeals fell on deaf ears. His predecessor to the parliament had lodged a similar appeal. That predecessor met a worse fate. He was charged with endangering national security, sentenced to jail time, followed by exile to a rural area, and his children were denied state-funded education. Conditions are even more hostile for Protestant and Catholic leaders. One Iranian-American convert from Islam could have been executed for his apostasy and for converting other Muslims to the Boise, Idaho-based Calvary Chapel. Another pastor who converted from Shiism has been arrested many times since 2006 for preaching on behalf of the Protestant movement. Yet another pastor has been imprisoned repeatedly, despite being of Armenian descent and being of those protected communities. At various times over the last few years, over 300 Christians have been arbitrarily arrested and detained throughout Iran. This is since 2010, according to the UN report. Current Supreme Leader Khamenei never forgoes an opportunity to talk about, in his words, the removal of Jews from Iran. The international press does not focus much on the Supreme Leader. They tend to focus more on President Ahmadinejad. But let's keep in mind, Ahmadinejad will be gone from the scene soon. Khamenei will be there, perhaps for a long time more. And his words are what guide the militants in the Basij paramilitary, the Committee on Public Morals, and other Shia organizations which use those words as license to persecute Iran's Jewish population. From petty things like name-calling of Jewish children as they go to and from school, to defiling kosher meals of office workers. Made-up issues aimed at intensifying Shia fears of impurity are propagated through comic books, radio, TV, clips uploaded to YouTube. We also know Iran hosts Holocaust-denying sites. Now, what does all this mean? I would just like to close with one sort of final observation. When the UN report about Iran's human rights violations came out, Iran reacted vociferously. Chief Justice Larijani in February 2013 pointed out that it was an unintentional mistake, in his words, that Iran even ratified the Human Rights Declaration. Other Iranian parliamentarians and officials came out denying the contents of the Human Rights Report. While championing of religious freedoms often takes a back seat to diplomatic, economic, and security issues in international politics, much to the detriment of humanity, I would say, as Iranian leaders struggle against UN sanctions on the nuclear issue, Iranian leaders are seeking to avoid further alienation from the global community due to the human rights issue. So an opportunity exists. As we have seen, when there is public pressure, the death penalties are commuted. Pastors are released. So an opportunity exists, not only to keep up international pressure on the Islamic Republic to fully honor its commitments, but also to reshape its attitudes towards minorities and towards the concept of full freedom for all its citizens. Thank you.
Shall I just go ahead? Do I have 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, we had a discussion beforehand as to whether we should identify ourselves religiously, and I am going to say I am a Sufi, but that's all I'm going to say about it, because I belong to a Sufi order that holds the principle that they who know don't say, and they who say don't know. So we don't talk in public about esoteric matters. We don't have any interest in turning our tradition into something you can buy online. Pakistan is probably the worst country in terms of the repression of Sufis, in terms of bloodshed. And I'm going to read a list of a roster of atrocities that we've put together as part of a declaration that we're directing to international organizations. Pakistan is definitely the worst in bloodshed. Iran is the worst in legal repression. The Gonabadi Nimatullahi Sufis, who are the largest Sufi order in Iran, that's a public Sufi order as opposed to the kind of Sufi order I belong to. There are much larger esoteric orders, but the Gonabadi Nimatullahis are the largest who have a public presence. They are the most repressed, and it's a paradox because Iran is, universally known as one of the great countries of Sufism, if not the greatest country of Sufism. The only one that tries to sort of outdo them is Morocco. But the Gonabadi Nimatullahi Sufis reject the idea of Walaya al-Faqih, which is governance by the clerics. Walaya al-Faqih is a heresy. You can go all through Islamic history. Clerics are not supposed to rule. Clerics are supposed to advise the rulers. It's true that there have been occasional examples where extremely charismatic, sometimes Sufis, or clerics have temporarily established emirates and so on and so forth. But the Islamic tradition is that the clerics advise the rulers. The rulers are emirs, princes, kings, military men, and in modern times politicians. So the Iranian concept of Khomeini, of Walaya al-Faqih, is a heresy. And he admitted that it did not was not based on Islamic sources. He said he got the idea because he was so fascinated by Plato's idea of the philosopher king. I could go on about the role of Greek philosophy in Iran, but I won't go on about that. It is a very interesting topic, though, because in the 16th century, the study of Greek philosophy was revived in Iran. We have a declaration. Frankly, we don't think this declaration is going to work, because the Center for Islamic Pluralism got an inquiry from the UN International Heritage Protection RARA team asking us what they should do in Timbuktu, and we said, what are you asking us for? This is supposed to be your business. This is what you're getting paid $120,000 a year for. Well, most of our people are volunteers or work on minimum salaries. You're supposed to know what to do about this. Why are you asking us? Well, we have a solution, but it's not their solution. I'm going to quickly read the catalog that we include in it's called an appeal to international organizations against attacks and atrocities of sacred sites. Two of these incidents are probably Hindu incidents directed against Muslims in India, but we included them because we say we're against any attacks on any sacred sites of any religion. 1995, the mausoleum of Sheikh Nuruddin Rishi in Kashmir was bombed. 2002, and I been very deeply personally involved in this, Wahhabi radicals took over the Harabati Sufi shrine in Macedonia, which is the it's the largest Sufi installation outside Albania and the Balkans. 2005, the Imam Bari shrine in Islamabad, Pakistan was bombed. 18 people were killed, up to 100 injured. 2007, the mosque and shrine of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani in Baghdad, one of the most important Sufi shrines in the world, was attacked with explosives, killing at least 24 people, injuring numerous others. Same year, 2007, the most famous Sufi structure in India, the Muhyiddin Chishti shrine in Ajmer Sharif was bombed. That may have been a Hindutva thing, with 2 dead and at least 10 injured. 2007 is when the campaign really began in Pakistan. The Abdul Shakur Malang Baba shrine in Peshawar was almost totally destroyed by bombing. 2008, rocket attack on the shrine of Hazrat Abu Sayyid Baba near Peshawar. Now, a lot of this goes on in Peshawar because Peshawar is Taliban country. Killed 10 villages. The Ashab Baba shrine, the same area, was rocketed. 2009, the shrine in Peshawar of the distinguished Sufi poet Rehman Baba, this is deeply shocking in Pakistan, was devastated by explosives. In fact, it really shocked the entire South Asia. The next day, the tomb of the Sufi Bahadur Baba in Nowshera near Peshawar was destroyed. The shrines of Chalgazai Baba and Sheikh Omar Baba in Peshawar were also assaulted. 2010, the Mian Umar Baba shrine in Peshawar was demolished. The Data Darbar shrine in Lahore was struck. 45 were killed and 175 injured. Shrine of Abdullah Ghazi, Shah Ghazi, the patron saint of Karachi, was bombed. 8 dead, 65 injured. Mausoleum of Baba Faruddin Gan Shakar in Pakistan blown up. At the end of the year, shots aimed at the Ghazi, killing 6 and injuring 15. Shots aimed at the end of the year at the Ghazi Baba shrine near Peshawar killed 3 caretakers. 2010, a bombing conspiracy against the Sufi observance of Ivatovica, which is a festival held in Bosnia, was prevented after an attack on a local police station, killed 1 officer and injured 6 more. 2011, bomb planted at the Akhund Panjo Baba shrine near Peshawar, killed 7 people and injured 25. 2011, mob attacks on Sufi mosques in Alexandria, Egypt. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. Wave of shrine decorations, desecrations in the Nile Delta destroyed 5 Sufi sites. 2011 and 2012 became the shocking events in Libya where Sufi shrines are destroyed, and then the attack on Timbuktu, which was really deeply shocking because Timbuktu is a very special place for all Muslim scholars, and we kind of figured that the rest of the world wasn't paying much attention. Well, they have to pay attention now because the Wahhabis descended upon it, and most of the shrines were baked mud walls, and they were easy to destroy. And numerous shrines of all religions have been destroyed in the Syrian civil war. In Syria...
Steve, is that your list? Did
Yeah.
you compile that? Is that available on your website?
We're going to put it on the website tonight because of this event.
Okay, great.
And we're asking for signatures from religious scholars. In Syria, which is very hard to talk about, I have to say, the tomb of the prophet Elijah, who is honored, much honored in Islam and Christianity and Judaism, Ilyas we call him in Islam, has been destroyed. The tomb and synagogue of the prophet Elijah. The Umayyad Mosque, which includes in it the tomb of the Jewish prophet Zechariah, who's also honored in Islam and Christianity, has been partially destroyed. Terrible things are happening in Syria. Most Westerners don't understand that Damascus is the place where the Sunni sect was founded. I mean, that's where Sunnism comes from. Every Sunni in the world is watching this. Every Sunni in the world over the age of 8 is watching the systematic destruction of Syria by the so-called Alawite sect, which until the 1970s was not even considered Muslim. It wasn't even considered part of Islam. And they are systematically destroying the country. And this will not be forgotten. Unless something is done, and I'm not one of these people who's going to make off-the-wall military recommendations. I do think a no-fly zone is a good idea, but unless something is done, for 3 generations, Al-Qaeda and Sunni extremists will have a one-word, unanswerable appeal: Syria. Because what is happening is the complete destruction of a country. We don't think, frankly, we're going to post this, we don't think this works. We don't think it's going to work. We don't think, I mean, the fact that these UN people would call us up and ask what to do was, I was flabbergasted by that. What we do think works, and what we know works, is local resistance by moderate Muslims. Egyptians, for example, have protected Sufi shrines. And the Nile governorate of Al-Qalyubia, townspeople fought the radicals in 2011 and again in 2012, organized a human shield to protect the Sufi shrine of Sheikh Muhammad al-Nabarawi. The most interesting case, I was going to talk mostly about Iran, but everybody else talked about Iran, so. But what happens is that every time that Ghanabadi, Ni'matullahi Sufis are attacked, there are riots and there's resistance. In January of this year, in the large city of Shahrikhord, one morning the Ghanabadis woke up and found that a private courtyard had been destroyed where they were going to hold a Sufi ceremony. 4,000 Sufis camped around the house to prevent further raids. The Pasdaran, the Revolutionary Guards, have this thing of burning the Sufi sites down. The people prevented this from happening. But it's happened before in other places. It happened in Qom, the religious center. It happened in Bourgerd, which is a western city, and it happened on the island of Quiche on the southern coast. For 2 days, Shahrikhord, we got direct reports on it. It was, they call it the commune of Shahrikhord because the whole city rose up to defend the Sufis. But the Ghanabadis are still in jail and still being arrested. The biggest and the most famous and infamous attack on the Ghanabadis was in 2009 in the city of Isfahan, which is also a religious center and a very famous cultural center in Iran. Riot police assaulted Sufis, the Ghanabadis, at the tomb of the 19th century poet and enlightener Nasser Ali, who sent his daughters to secular schools. And the tomb was looted and demolished. When the Sufis met to protest, they were assaulted with batons and tear gas, but they also fought back. Now, I know Sufis have this reputation in the West of being peaceful, huggy bear type of people, but not all Sufis are peaceful, huggy bear type of people. There are jihadist Sufis, and there are Sufis who will fight back and defend ourselves. In 2008, the incident in Qom took place, which was a really outrageous incident. In the Borajirid incident, after the local bureaucrats used bulldozers to remove the ruins of the local Sufi house after burning it down, about 100 people were reported arrested, at least 80 were injured in resistance. This year, there was a demonstration at Evin Prison, the infamous Evin Prison, where Sufis showed up and camped out in front of the prison to protest against the arrest of the Gonabadi webmasters. Around 350 were arrested. Some were mistreated, but they were released in the evening. There's another incident I'm going to just mention. And that is, well, I mentioned Qom. The Qom incident was really quite a deal. 1,200 people were arrested for fighting to defend the structure. I don't think that we Sufis have any hope. I mean, look, it's been what? It's been 14 years almost since 9/11. Nobody cares about the Sufis. People think that the Sufis are different from Sunnis and Shias. People say, "Are you a Sufi?" And I say, "Yes." They say, "So you're not a Sunni or a Shia?" Well, actually, there are Sunni Shias and there are Sufi Shia. There are Sunni Sufis and Shia Sufis, and people don't know anything about Sufism. They think it's some kind of weird perennialist mixture of all religions. They think it's irrelevant. The one guy who stood up for us and tried to do something in the American government was a gentleman named Douglas Feith. Nobody responded. I used to talk to Wolfowitz about this, and he was very interested. Nothing happened, and I don't blame Paul for that. The fact is, nobody in any government, nobody in the UN, nobody's going to help us. We're going to have to help ourselves. And we are going to have to help ourselves in some cases by demonstrations and even by fighting. That's the reality. Because the alternative is permanent imprisonment, torture, execution. That's the situation of the Sufis in Iran. I don't know what to add to it. It's a very difficult situation because it's really all based on the fact that we reject Wali al-Faqih, we reject the idea of governance by clerics, and that's very dangerous to the Iranian regime. Shias have I'm going to close with this point that Westerners don't know. Shias have a custom called hums. Sunnis pay an annual tax called zakat, which is 2.5% of your assets. But Shias are supposed to pay a 20% levy called hums, which goes to the Ayatollah that you follow. And if you say that the clerics are not legitimate in ruling the government, you're threatening their financial security, as well as the fact that next month there's going to be an election. And if there's another green movement, a bigger one this time, and the Sufis are in the forefront of it, as they were in the last time, I mean, these guys, the regime, I'm going to close on this one point that I make to Westerners all the time. People in Saudi Arabia and people in Iran, if there are political changes, they're not going to go from repressive, intolerant, rigid fundamentalism to more repressive, more intolerant, more rigid fundamentalism. It's absurd to think that. It would be as if the Soviet Union had announced in 1989 that they were going to go back to the program of Lenin and the Comintern. It is not going to happen. People have had it in Saudi. We have a very large group in Saudi. People have definitely had it in Iran. They've had 88 years of this in Saudi Arabia. They're sick of it. People in Iran are tired of it. They want to move on. Political change, real political change, will mean the end of the Islamist regimes. The Islamist regimes are taking power in countries where, like Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood, the people hadn't experienced Islamist radicalism before in power, and the Muslim Brotherhood had this glorious reputation for being honest and building hospitals and giving out free food and all this other social stuff. And the fact is the Muslim Brotherhood always had a program that stressed social issues. But we don't believe that Saudis are in a hurry to have a more extreme Wahhabi regime, or that Iranians are in a hurry to have a more extreme form of Wali al-Faqih. If there's a change, it'll be a positive change. But we don't, I'm sorry, we don't depend on the UN or the United States or the British or the French or anybody else to help us. We are going to have to help ourselves. As is said in Quran, no nation can improve its situation unless it acts on its own to improve its situation. We follow that guidance and we believe in resistance and we support resistance wherever it takes place, wherever it can be organized. Thank you very much. This has been a great honor to speak at Hudson on this occasion. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
I'd like to open up for some questions and ask you to please identify yourself and wait for the microphone. So we have a question up front. I think you have to put it close to
Katie,
the
sorry. Katie Gorka, Westminster Institute. Well, it's 3 great talks. Thank you very much, and it raises many, many questions. I'll throw out one, and that is, Stephen, I found your talk particularly interesting. And I wonder if I could ask you, what do you see as the prospects within Sufi Islam for living alongside Christians peacefully and living alongside other minorities?
You put me in a difficult situation because the stream of Sufism that I belong to has very good relations with Christians. We celebrate St. George's Day, for example. But Balkan Muslims in general celebrate St. George's Day. We have adopted a number of Christian customs, and others in the same stream have adopted quite a considerable number of Christian customs. The tradition among what I would call the moderate non-fundamentalists, because there are fundamentalists in jihadist Sufis, but the dominant tradition in Sufism is one of friendship with the Christians, and in one case, only one case that I know of, inspiration from the Jewish Kabbalah, because most of what happened with the Kabbalah went in the other direction. Kabbalah is borrowed from Sufism. But there is an interesting chapter where it's clear that one Sufi trend borrowed from Kabbalah. Look, we're Sufis. We don't believe that all religions are the same. We don't believe that the Toltec religion of cutting people's hearts out is the same as Christianity. We don't believe that all religions are the same. But we believe that the monotheistic religions, Taoism, Confucianism, I hope Buddhism, I don't know, that the basic religions, the religions that have established their legitimacy, the religions that were invited by King Abdullah to Madrid to the failed conference in Madrid, can and should live together and have dialogue. But it shouldn't be fake dialogue. It shouldn't be a dialogue that tries to pretend there aren't differences. It shouldn't be a dialogue where somebody gets up and says, I'm a Jewish Buddhist Sufi. No, 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 no. You have to respect the differences. You have to respect the differences.
Hello.
Hilo Franken of the Hudson Institute, and I would also like to praise the panel and my colleague Nina for organizing this. I have 2 questions. One's quite specific for Professor Choksi and one for the panel generally. My question for Jamshid is this business of purification and impurities. It was very noticeable when Ayatollah Khomeini first published his thoughts back in 1970, 1969, that he was quite obsessed with this issue of purity. What I'm wondering is, in your opinion, whether it was idiosyncratic to him or was important, generally speaking, for the movement he founded and in other ways as well. The more general question is this. It has to do with, in a way, the theme of this, which is the rise of Islamism. One of the most noteworthy and present consequences of that, as we see from the Arab Spring, but also from earlier manifestations, is a very heightened sensibility, religious sensibility altogether in the region, which is leading, at least at the present time, to fundamentally a Sunni Shiite war. and we see this in the most concentrated form in Syria, but it's now has come to define the moment. And I was wondering what the panel thought is going to be, if that continues, what the consequences are, not only for, obviously this will have an effect on intra-Muslim conflicts in, say, Pakistan, which Farah spoke about, but also for the non-Muslim minorities in all of these countries. What's the fallout for them from what is essentially an intra-Muslim fight?
Hillel, to respond to the first part of your question, this whole issue of religious purity and pollution and rituals and all certainly is, shall we say, very strong in Shiism generally, particularly in the Ithna Ashari or Imami strand that is dominant in contemporary Iran. And in some ironic sense, it's sort of an irony that Shiism probably picked it up from Zoroastrianism, which contributed it ultimately to Judaism and Christianity as well. But whereas we've seen those ideas, in a sense, move away in time in Zoroastrianism, in Judaism, in Christianity, they tended to coalesce again around individuals like the Ayatollah Khomeini and his mentors. And like I said, this got reinforced through Nazi anti-Semitism. They used to, listen to the radio broadcast coming out of Berlin. All that sort of stuff came together, and they sort of gave it this religious overtone. And then from Khomeini, it spread to the second and third generations of clerics who are currently running Iran. And so I think that issue is going to continue among the clergy of Iran. Now, that's not to say all the clergy subscribe to it to the same extent, but as we've seen, even the so-called legendary, ultimately towards the end of his life, more liberal Montazari still could not move away from those sort of basic ideas. So I think that's there. I think those ideas ultimately also influence Iran's outlook towards a nation like Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia's outlook towards Iran. So your issue of shall we say, the growing Shia-Sunni conflict, Syria, Pakistan, Iran, it's across the entire region. It's happening in Bahrain. It's going to happen right across the Emirates. And from everything that I have seen and heard about Saudi Arabia, the Saudis, by shall we say, taking in Bahrain, have sort of swallowed a heavy dose of that issue. And my prediction is that we're going to continue to see this develop further, and there's a lot more going on, for example, in Saudi Arabia than the press ever reports on this issue.
Thank you, Hillel. That was a very good question. I'd like to make a point. Shia Islam, especially in Iran, has always had contamination issues. I mean, going back for a long time. Purification by, she used the term takfiri. Takfir means to declare a Muslim outside the faith. Sunni purificationism, Wahhabi purificationism, Deobandi, Taliban purificationism is not about contamination. It's about getting rid of so-called unacceptable innovations. This is why Saudi Arabia has no movie houses. So there are two different forms of purification. There's the Shia form of purification, which means separate yourself from the unclean, and there's the Sunni form of purification, which means separate yourself from the modern, the non-Muslim, the unacceptable innovation, the so-called bid'ah. All I have to say about all I have to say about the Sunni-Shia war is this: if the Alawites, not Alevis, God forgive me for saying that because the Alevis are not like the Alawites at all. We work very closely with Alevis. Our group in Germany is entirely Alevi. Our group in Turkey is Alevi. If the Syrian Alawites destroy Syria, the Sunnis will pay back the Shias in blood that will, in a way that will be unbelievably terrible. And it won't, well, the non-Muslims will be caught in the crossfire, but the Sunnis aren't, I mean, sure, they're crazy Sunnis. You talk about a Saudi, Israeli, American plot against Syria, but the real ordinary Sunnis, all they see is Shia Iran and Hezbollah are destroying Damascus and Syria. And if this happens, if this group of basically bandits from the mountains who weren't even considered Muslims until 1978, if they succeed in destroying Syria, the Sunni revenge will last for a long time, and it will affect us all. As I said, the Al-Qaeda will have a one-word, unanswerable appeal for generations, Syria. And it could result in not perhaps the disappearance, but very, very serious revenge against the Shias.
We're already seeing a little bit of that in the papers today. The story in the Washington Post on Syria was about the statistics from the Human Rights Observatory in London, saying that 41,000 of the deaths of the some 70 or 90 deaths in Syria are Alawites deaths. Extraordinarily high figures. But, you know, I wonder what the panel's reaction in a way to Hilal's question is that it seems like a logical line that if you have a regime or government that's based on religion, then anyone who is not that religion is a national security threat. And I think, Jamshid, you've already talked about that. I'd like to know your reaction. Yeah, yours and Farah.
Certainly, I think we are beginning to see this across the region. I think if you look, for example, at Saudi Arabia, you may recall that it was just a couple of months ago, the Saudi embassy sent out emails and letters to all Saudi students in the country that they better not protest, they better not challenge the regime, or else they'll have their fellowships stripped away and they'll be shipped back. And I can tell you something very interesting that happened. For a couple of weeks, all the Saudi students I ran into were mum. And a couple of weeks later, they're back to, yeah, the regime, as one of them told me, the regime wants to educate us and then wants to tells us to shut up like animals. That's what the reaction was. So, the Saudis, I think, are going to face the same sort of problem the Shah faced. That is, you can't provide education and knowledge without bringing about true political change and letting that occur as well. But this whole issue of minorities also getting caught in the crossfire. We saw this in Iraq. Okay. We are seeing this in Syria. Okay. We're seeing this in Pakistan. So this is, they get caught in the crossfire. They also, what happens is that the larger conflict between the Sunnis and the Shia provides opportunities for both Sunnis and Shia to grab land, homes, etc., from the minorities. So we've seen, you know, essentially the demolition of the Nestorians in Iraq as a result of this, and we're seeing this happen with Christian groups in Syria. So, you know, we've written about this issue in Egypt as well. So, I think what part of shall we say this broader, both the spread of fundamentalist forms of Islam, the battle within Islam, I think is going to basically reshape everything, let's say, from India, Pakistan to Morocco, and not for the better in terms of a pluralistic society.
Farah, did you want to?
Yeah.
add something to that?
Hilal, my answer to you is not, I would not agree that, you know, this Sunni/Shia war is the primary, is new and is primarily a process where non-Muslims, what the fallout is, as I explained in Pakistan's example, they started with the non-Muslims first, with the purification process. We used to have, and still do have, a synagogue in Karachi. We still have a tiny Jewish population. But what has happened over time, they went for the weakest, you know, non-Muslim, like most of the Zoroastrians have left Pakistan. There are a handful of Jews left. All the Christians who were well off, or could, or have left. Among the Shias, or the medical, I don't call them Sunnis, but what the extremists have done is they have targeted on purpose the professional Shias, the doctors, the lawyers, etc., and they have all fled, right? So at the end of the day, this is not in Pakistan a Sunni Shia fight, right? And the difference between Pakistan and comparing it to countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia is Pakistan is still ostensibly a democratic country. But the democracy is being eroded. And the question is why? The question is because the military establishment in Pakistan and the higher judiciary in Pakistan use groups like the Lashkar-e-Jangvi, the LEJ, the SSP, all of these groups for strategic depth purposes in Afghanistan, in Kashmir, and elsewhere, including within Pakistan in Baluchistan. So it is fascinating during the Pakistani elections, the three left of center political parties. And in Pakistan, left of center and liberal is not always a bad word. It means the ones which are more secular, believe in human rights, women's rights, minority rights. The Taliban went after the PPP, the ANP, and the MQM. We could not hold political rallies. Our election offices were bombed, major killings throughout. Whereas the two right of center parties, Mr. Nawaz Sharif's, who has never criticized the Taliban, and Mr. Imran Khan, who actually put out a press release during the campaign saying that he does not accept the Ahmadis as Muslims. He refers to them as Qadianis, which is a huge slur. And, you know, the fact that he had to go to this, on May 1, he said he had absolute belief in the finality of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Anyone claiming prophethood against him is a liar. This belief of mine is the same of that of the entire Muslim Ummah. Now, this is targeting an already heavily targeted community. And this man, Mr. Imran Khan, is now going to form government in one of Pakistan's 4 provinces. The person who is going to form, now this is all under democracy. You see, you're not talking about Iran or Saudi Arabia. This is what's frightening going forward.
And he is, to clarify, he is the mainstream popular cricket player.
Yeah.
Well, in the West, that's how he's seen, but
Yeah.
I call him, in...
The ex-husband of Jemima Goldsmith.
well, I don't think that's relevant here, but... Mr. Nawaz Sharif, who will form government at the federal level, his brother in 2010, his brother was chief minister of our largest province, Punjab, and he was chief minister. He made an appeal to the Pakistani Taliban to spare his province, Punjab, because like the Pakistani Taliban, his party was anti-US. So what all these parties have in common, the ones who have won, is anti-American, anti-minority, pro-Taliban. So even democracy, can lead to these results. And the fascinating thing is the moment the election campaign finished and Mr. Sharif won the center, Mr. Khan won a province, the Taliban attacks on the 3 more secular parties ended. So this is how you rig even in a democratic system. And that's the reality of Pakistan. So I don't, you know, Sunni, Shia, depends where you stand. Shia is a very bad word. In Iran, everyone hates. In Washington, I agree for a lot of reasons, you know, in terms of religious persecution. But I don't know. Numbers will matter, Hillel. At the end of the day, who is arming? Who is arming the Pakistani establishment to arm these groups who are then at home allowed to kill Pakistanis? So our own judiciary, our own military establishment is allowing them to kill our own Pakistani citizens as long as they do their jihad elsewhere. Bottom line is, who's arming these groups and where does it go from now? So I think it's going to be about numbers and not just clearly Sunni and Shia. Who has the most money will win this.
I think we have time for one or two quick questions, and I hope they can elicit more optimistic answers.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Quickly, yeah.
Our group is rather optimistic, which I think is paradoxical considering I'm known as the #1 Wahhabi basher in the West. We think that the reform process in Saudi Arabia is authentic. We believe that King Abdullah really wants change. We believe that Saudis were as shocked by 9/11 as Americans were, because Saudis never thought that the relationship with America would turn in that direction. There have been serious, real reforms, and we are somewhat optimistic about Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi. I'm Verda Khalil. I'm here as Hubert Humphrey Fellow. I'm a journalist from Pakistan. So as Ms. Farhana said about the Pakistan situation, you answered half of my question, which I was thinking for a long time. So as Pakistani Army Chief gave a statement a few days ago, like Islam cannot be separated from Islam. Pakistan cannot be separated from Islam. Mm-hmm. And the resistance from Pakistani parliament, always the resistance in changing blasphemy law because of the backlash of the people. And some other stuff like extremist groups who have been supported, allegedly supported by Saudi Arabia and some other governments. So there is, if you talk about the sectarian issues in Pakistan, how do you see, if there is no policy change in institutes of Pakistan, like government, judiciary, and the parliament, how do you see the change in the situation of minorities in Pakistan? Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just ask, do you work for a news organization in Pakistan? Okay. Wonderful. It's wonderful to see young women like you. What General Kiani actually said was, let me, and he said me personally, which is very strange for the Chief of Army Staff. Let me remind you that Pakistan was created in the name of Islam, and Islam can never ever be taken out of Pakistan. However, Islam should always remain a unifying force. I assure you that regardless of odds, the Pakistan Army will keep on doing its best towards our common dream for a truly Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Now, the timing of content of the speech was very strange because it was right before the runoff to the election cycle. The fact that now this was not the case. This is like Ziaul Haq, this is like the 1970s, come back with a bang. So the progress in between seems to have been sort of wiped out, which is quite frightening. But yes, I reported for the Human Rights Committee in Parliament in Pakistan on, for example, Gujra. I worked for the president at that time. And the difficulty we had with the government of Punjab, who are now going to be the government in center, they had already burnt alive 7 Christians by the time the federal government could get the Punjab government to send in the rangers. So the point is that the minorities now, and as I said, the richer ones have left, and the minorities are now voiceless, and many people now, because of the killings of prominent leaders like Benazir Bhutto, Salman Taseer, Shahbaz Bhatti, are terrified to speak. So the English media, like Express English, for example, or Dawn, or whatever, will write about these issues, but in the Urdu press, there's no recognition that any non-Muslims of a very conservative kind even exist. Thank you.
Okay, we have come to the end of our time, and I really want to thank our very informed and thoughtful panel for this very rich discussion today, and I can only hope American policy makers are listening.
And our thanks to Nina for arranging this.
Yes, thank you, Nina.
Thanks.
Salams to you.
No, it was an excellent job, really, everybody.
I hope my optimistic comment about
You know, I don't have a card.
Well, I had to bite my tongue, but
Hey, nice to see you again.
another day.